Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everybody. My name is Jo Tyndall. I'm the Director of the Environment Directorate at the OECD, and I'm going to be your moderator for today's Green Talk Live, where we launch our new Regional Plastics Outlook for Southeast and East Asia report. Now, plastics, we know, are used for a huge range of applications, from food preservation to medical devices. And I think for anyone who has endeavored to eliminate plastic from their daily life, they find rapidly that the task is next to impossible. Well, plastics offer, of course, numerous benefits, but their life cycle can lead to pollution, can contribute to climate change and exacerbate biodiversity loss. In response, countries around the world have scaled up action to tackle plastic pollution in recent years. And to better coordinate policy efforts, in 2022, negotiations began to develop an international, legally binding instrument to end plastic pollution. As I speak, we're only a few days away from the second part of the fifth round of negotiations taking place in Geneva. The OECD has supported these negotiations right from the start and has been at the forefront of analytical work on plastics for over a decade now. Some of our earlier work explored recycling markets, policy approaches to incentivize sustainable plastic design, and policies for addressing microplastics pollution in water. More recently, we've looked at how extended producer responsibility schemes could encourage the reduction, reuse, and repair of plastic items. Then in 2022, we published our landmark Global Plastics Outlook, the first publication to comprehensively take stock of global plastics production, use, and waste generation. And a second report provided projections to 2060, quantifying the negative environmental impacts of plastics and proposing concrete policies, solutions, or actions governments can take to mitigate them. These reports show that the plastic life cycle is far from circular. While the world is producing twice as much plastic waste as two decades ago, the bulk of it ends up landfilled, incinerated, or leaking into the environment, and at a stubbornly low just 9% recycled. And if we continue with the current policies, the amount of plastic waste produced globally is on track to almost triple by 2060. And that's driven particularly by short-lived items such as packaging. Last year, we followed up with a new report on the environmental benefits and economic consequences of different levels of ambition aimed at ending plastic pollution by 2040. It's really important to note that plastic production, use, waste, and leakage to the environment are not uniformly distributed across the globe. A whopping 83% of the top polluting rivers, which transport more than 90% of plastic pollution into the ocean, are located in Asia. And for this reason, the OECD undertook a deep dive into Southeast and East Asia, a powerhouse region that contributes a substantial share to the global economy, has strategic positions in plastic value chains, and is also a region experiencing rapidly rising plastics demand. So the consequence of this is that ending plastic pollution in this region is key not only to protecting local economies and livelihoods, but also to safeguarding planetary health. And so you might ask, well, what does the plastic policy landscape look like in the region in Southeast and East Asia? What types of policies are needed to eliminate plastic leakage to the environment in the region? And what factors could governments consider when designing and implementing plastic policies? Our new report being launched today is the first to comprehensively map the plastic life cycle in the Asia-Pacific region and provides really important insights on these and other questions. Now, before we get underway, I just would like to acknowledge the support from and the very close engagement with our OECD member countries and the 13 countries profiled in this report, which include the OECD members, Japan and Korea. I'd also like to extend my thanks for the insight provided by experts at the Economic Research Institute for ASEAN and East Asia and at the Institute for Global Environmental Strategies. So now, let's get on with the show. To kick us off, Shardul Agrawala, who is head of the Environment and Economy Integration Division, Ruben Bibas, economist, and Elena Butzi, who is a junior environmental policy analyst, are collectively going to present the key findings of the report. And following their presentation, we're going to hear reactions and insights from four discussants. So there, I'd like to give a very warm welcome, first to Noriko Tamiyahase, who's Deputy Director of the Office of Policies Against Marine Plastic Pollution at the Ministry of the Environment of Japan. Then we have Bunga Karnisa, Indonesia National Plastic Action Partnership Community and Project Coordinator at the World Resources Institute of Indonesia. Third is Junu Shretha, the Senior Environmental Specialist at the World Bank. And finally, Indradi Faisal Ibrahim, who is Capacity Building Expert for the Regional Knowledge Centre for Marine Plastic Debris at the Economic Research Institute for ASEAN and East Asia. So after their interventions, we're going to open the floor for questions. And just a reminder for those joining online, please, you can send questions at any time during this event using the Q&A function in Zoom, and we will try to address as many of them as possible within the time available. But now I'm going to hand over to Shardul to begin the presentation of the key findings of the report. Shardul.
Thanks very much, Joe, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all of you. The Regional Plastics Outlook that we are launching today is the product of a 3-year effort at the OECD in close collaboration with many experts in East and Southeast Asia. Together with my colleagues, Ruben Bibas and Elena Butzi, I'll be sharing some of the key highlights over the next 25 minutes or so. So first is the question, why have a plastics outlook focused on Southeast and East Asia? And Joe, in her opening remarks, already alluded to some of the reasons why we decided to do this regional plastics outlook. But just to elaborate a bit more, this region is an economic powerhouse. It's one of the fastest growing regions in the world. It already contributes roughly 30% to global GDP, and it also constitutes roughly 30% of the global population. In terms of plastics use, the percentages are similar. It's roughly 30% of global plastic use and 30% of the global plastic waste generation. The region also hosts some of the largest producers and consumers of plastic polymers and is also a major hub for recycling activities. It is also a hotspot for plastic pollution, which is also exacerbated by the somewhat unique geography of the region with over 150,000 kilometers of coastline. And that is putting a lot of activities which are dependent on the ocean economy at risk from plastic pollution. But another key important point beyond these broad brush aggregates is that the region has very high levels of heterogeneity within it in terms of the geographical size of the countries, the size of the economies of the different countries, and also their levels of development and circumstances. We have the world's second largest economy, China, in the region. We have 3 high-income countries, Korea, Japan, and Singapore in the region, several upper middle-income countries, but also a number of lower and middle-income countries in the region with vastly different circumstances. So as such, this region is a microcosm of and pathfinder for both the opportunities and the challenges that the global community will confront as it moves forward to combat plastic pollution. So specifically, we are focusing on 13 countries in East and Southeast Asia, the 10 member states of ASEAN, plus Japan, Korea, and the People's Republic of China. And this grouping is normally called APT, or ASEAN plus 3. So just to give you a brief overview of what the Regional Plastic Outlook contains, it provides a comprehensive quantification of plastic use, waste, and leakage for the 13 APT countries. We also developed the first ever stocktake of current policies, both at the level of specific countries, but also at the regional level in terms of efforts to combat plastic pollution so far. Then we transitioned to our modeling exercise, which is the core of the Regional Plastics Outlook. We developed baseline projections of plastic use, waste generation, and environmental consequences to mid-century. We also developed comprehensive policy packages to eliminate plastic leakage in the region. And finally, we conclude with a policy roadmap to turn ambition into action. In terms of our modeling approach, it is very similar to what we used in the Global Plastics Outlook. We start with projections of the regional and sectoral economic drivers of plastic use. This leads to projections of plastic use, and then we make estimates of plastic waste generation. And finally, we quantify the environmental impacts from plastic use and waste. What is different in the Regional Plastics Outlook relative to the Global Plastics Outlook is the granularity of the analysis for East and Southeast Asia. We isolate 5 of the 13 APT countries, so Japan, Korea, China, Indonesia, and Thailand. And for the remaining 8 countries in the region, we have 2 groupings. One grouping is focused on the high income and the upper middle income countries, and this includes 3 countries, Brunei, Dar es Salaam, Malaysia, and Singapore. And then the other grouping called Rest of ASEAN, LMIC, the lower middle income countries, has Cambodia, Laos PDR, Philippines, Vietnam, and Myanmar. So that's just a very quick overview of how we are approaching the modeling. But now I'd like to transition to some of the key findings. So the first message, which is consistent with what's happening globally, but perhaps at an accelerated rate in this region, is how rapidly plastic use has increased in the past few decades. Overall, for the APT countries, plastic use has increased by a factor of 9 between 1990 and 2022. If I could get the first, yes. Now, when we look at the ASEAN countries as a grouping, they started from a relatively low base, roughly 3.3 million tons in 1990, and it increased to roughly 30 million tons by 2022. Then, if you look at the +3 countries, they started with significantly higher values in 1990, roughly 14 million tons, increasing to over 120 million tons by 2022. And within the +3 countries also, you can see significant heterogeneity. You have Japan in bright blue, Korea in dark gray, and China in light gray. And you can see that China clearly dominates. And it started with a base of 8.4 million tons of plastic use in 1990 to over 100 million tons by 2022, which is an increase of a factor of 12.5, roughly. Overall, the total plastic use in the APT countries was 153 million tons, which is 31% of the global total. Now, in parallel with the increase in plastic use, there's also been an increase in plastic waste. In 2022, the APT countries generated 113 million tons of plastic waste. And in the pie chart, you can see the breakdown of the plastic waste. Packaging takes the lion's share with 44%. And these applications are generally with lifetimes of less than 6 months. Then textiles or packaging for humans is 13%, followed by consumer goods, 12%, transport, 8%. And the other category contains a whole range of activities ranging from construction to heavy industry and so on, which constitute the remaining 23%. The bottom line message, which is very similar to what we found in the Global Plastics Outlook, is that most of the plastic waste, in the case of the APT countries, it's over 2/3 of the plastic waste is coming from applications with lifespans of less than 5 years. Now, when we look at the 113 million tons of plastic waste that the APT countries generated in 2022, that's 29% of the global total. So again, in some ways, the picture so far is tracking the percentages: 30% of the global economy, 30% of the population, roughly 30% of plastic use, and roughly 30% of the plastic waste. Now, if you look at the end-of-life fates of the 130 million tons of plastic waste that was generated, roughly 30% was landfilled, so 35 million tons. Slightly less, 27% was incinerated, or 30.5 million tons. The recycling share is lower, 13.6 million tons, but as Joe also mentioned, the recycling rate in this region is 12%, which is higher than the global average of roughly 9%. On the other hand, a big challenge for the region is the large share of mismanaged waste, which is 32.8 million tons. So roughly 33 million tons out of 113 million tons of the waste that's generated is mismanaged. And within the mismanaged waste, a large share, roughly 25 million tons, is either burnt in open pits or dumped illegally. And the remainder leaks into the environment. So 8.4 million tons, of which 5.5 million tons leaks on land, and that's the terrestrial leakage, and 2.9 million tons is aquatic leakage. Now, looking a bit deeper into the picture on aquatic leakage. So first, I'd like to mention that 2.9 million tons of aquatic leakage is 40% of the global total. So here, in terms of the environmental impacts, this region has a bigger footprint than the economic or population shares would indicate, which is roughly 30%. And the plastics that are leaking have, as the chart shows, find different channels. Some of them enter the oceans directly. Some of them first flow into rivers, then end up in the ocean. But a significant share of plastics sink on lake and riverbeds as well as on ocean floors. And it's this buildup of stocks, which is a significant concern. So according to our estimates, already we have stocks of 16 million tons of plastic accumulated in oceans, and that's 35% of the global total, and 48 million tons of plastics accumulated in rivers and lakes in the region, which is 40% of the global total. So what these numbers seek to emphasize is that this region is absolutely key in the global fight against plastic pollution. Now, where do countries stand in terms of acting on policies to address plastic pollution, and what are the projections for the future? For that, let me pass to my colleague, Ruben Bibas.
Can we unmute Ruben? You're going to have to start again, sorry.
Apologies. Thank you, Shadol. Given the rising concern on plastic pollution, there is a lot of already policy action on the topic, which has been scaled up. So I will start first by presenting the policy stocktake that Shadol mentioned earlier. So first, let's see how the region is tackling the plastic pollution issue. 9 countries have already developed national action plans on marine litter and plastic debris. These action plans generally comprise downstream policies targeted at waste management and recycling, as well as upstream and midstream policies, including bans, reduction measures, and fiscal measures. There is also a growing emphasis on regional cooperation to tackle plastic pollution. The ASEAN member states signed the ASEAN Framework of Action on Marine Debris and the Bangkok Declaration of Combating Marine Debris, later launched the ASEAN Regional Action Plan for Combating Marine Debris. And also at the ASEAN +3 level, there is a promotion of circular economy action plans and addressing the issue of marine plastic debris in the ASEAN +3 cooperation work plan for 2023-2027. So what results are yielded from our policy stocktake? This policy stocktake rests on 32 indicators that are assessed for each country. Here is the example of one indicator across the 13 ASEAN +3 countries. In this presentation, I will, rather than show the detail by country, show this summarized quantification, counting the number of countries with advanced systems for each of the indicators in green, where the policy is inexistent or in infancy, it will show in red. Finally, the orange color will show systems that are at the early stages of implementation in planning phases or not strictly in force. So first, certification schemes and eco-labeling for recycling and recycled content are implemented in many of the APT countries. Extended producer responsibility for packaging are being gradually implemented. For instance, Japan and Korea have already well-established schemes that also extend further than just for plastics, further than just packaging. 4 ASEAN countries are at the early stages of implementation, and more countries, such as Malaysia, are in the planning stages. Third, the lack of landfill taxes in most of the APT country is a missed opportunity to ensure that the reduction of mismanaged waste. Overall, so policies to improve sorting and recycling are advancing, but the heterogeneity across instruments implementation reflects the heterogeneity in economic makeup, as well as past trends and current policy in the ASEAN +3 region. If we now turn to eco-design and plastic reduction, the policies to address those vary in stringency and remain underutilized. For instance, 7 countries have currently or have planned bans on part of the single-use plastics. 3 countries promote design for circularity, focusing on enhancing recyclability of plastics in particular. And the policies to promote reduction, reuse, and longer lifespans overall remain largely untapped. As you can see, most of the circle here is still red and orange. Overall, for most of the policies targeting plastics, weak enforcement poses challenges in many of the region countries. So what would be the consequences of these policies? In our outlook, in our report we provide an outlook to mid-century, so 2050, based on current economic trends and current policies. So under current policies, plastics use in the region will increase substantially from 150 million tons today to 220 million tons. Driving this increase is the rapid economic growth projected in the region, contributing 155 million tons of additional plastics. This growth is slowed down slightly from the trends for population. So it might come as a surprise, while many ASEAN countries still have a high growth. For instance, Indonesia and Philippines are each projected to have population increase by 40 million. China and Japan decrease respectively by 100 million and 20 million. So that's why population growth for the region is slowing down a bit plastics use. Furthermore, structural shifts in the region economies, particularly the growing share of services, reduce the plastic intensity of the economic activity. So that's what shows here a structural change and technological change, which slows down the growth in plastics use by another 20 million tons. As a result, the per capita use in the region increases from 67 kilograms per capita per year to 124 kilograms per capita per year, which is a quarter higher than the global average. What does it mean for waste management? The evolution of the specific end-of-life fates depend on a combination of 2 things: the growth in the total volume of waste and the changes in the shares of waste management options. Let's first look at recycling. In the case of recycling, both the increased quantity of waste and the improvement in waste management contribute to the increase in the amount of plastics being recycled. The tripling of the amount from 14 million tons to 45 million tons, and the improvement in waste management accounts for both the share of plastic waste that's collected for recycling, as well as the share of plastics that is collected for recycling, but ultimately discarded and not recycled. In contrast to recycling, the volume of mismanaged waste contains a trade-off between the amount of total waste and the share of waste that's properly managed. The fast growth in plastic waste generation contributes 38 million tons of mismanaged waste compared to the 2022 levels, but that growth is only partially offset by the improvement in waste management, in waste collection and sorting, which prevents 50 million tons from being generated. So the total volume of mismanaged waste only grows to 56 million tons by 2050. Behind these aggregate results, there's a lot of heterogeneity across the region. Shardul already alluded to it earlier in the presentation, but I wanted to give one flavor for it, which is more detailed in the report for most of the indicators. Let's focus on mismanaged waste, which is an essential indicator for plastics. First, because it leads to plastic leakage, but it also generates other negative environmental impacts through, for instance, open burning or illegal dumping. The current rates paint a very heterogeneous picture. It reflects past trends, countries' regulations, and other related policies, as well as the different local circumstances. For instance, the fact that many countries in the region are composed of many islands. First, Japan and Korea have very low level, lower than 1%. China has improved a lot in the recent past, but still a quarter of plastic waste produced is mismanaged. ASEAN is very heterogeneous. It ranges from 27% to 70%, 72%, with the lower middle income countries having rates close to 70%. If we now go to the outlook to 2050, all of the APT country, and that's a very positive message, show an improvement in waste management, reflecting the effect of increased waste collection and sorting efforts, which is in line with current policies and economic development. Despite the improvement in waste management, they come on top of very different shares in 2022. So the heterogeneity persists to 2050. As a consequence, total mismanaged waste in the ASEAN region is projected to double from 14 million tons to 28 million tons by 2050, and from 20 million tons to 28 million tons in China. As a summary of the outlook for the plastics life cycle in the ASEAN +3, the main conclusion is that the current policies fall short of eliminating plastic leakage in the region. Between 2022 and 2050, plastics use close to doubles from 150 million tons to 280 million tons. Accordingly, waste generated more than doubles from 113 million tons to 240 million tons. Much of that waste is composed of plastics with low life expectancy of less than 5 years. Despite the improvement in waste management, the mismanagement in dump sites and open pit burning and linkage into the environment increases from 33 million tons to 56 million tons. And therefore, leakage to the environment is projected to increase from 8.4 million tons to 14 million tons. It's more than 1/3 of this leakage reaches rivers, coastal areas, and oceans, which is then very, very difficult to clean up and costly. And one of the main results developed in the report is that ASEAN lower middle income countries are particularly vulnerable to intra-regional transport of leakage. So once plastic leakage reaches the rivers and oceans, especially the oceans, it can travel between countries. So the lower middle income countries are vulnerable. I will pass on to Elena for looking at how the region can end plastic pollution.
Thank you very much, Ruben. And indeed, what we see from the first two parts of this presentation is that on the one hand, we see quite high policy ambition in the region to eliminate plastic pollution, with already a number of national action plans being implemented and a number of measures along the life cycle of plastics. But at the same time, what the baseline scenario is telling us is that remaining on current policies would still significantly increase waste, mismanaged waste, and also pollution in the region, despite some improvements in recycling and waste management. So the outlook then also looks at what are the possible pathways for strengthening policies even further and putting the region on a pathway towards the elimination of plastic pollution. So to quantify the environmental and economic consequences of policy packages, we modeled various policy scenarios. The core policy scenario is the high stringency scenario, which models policy action across the life cycle of plastics, so including demand reduction policies, measures to design for circularity, and also policies to improve waste management and recycling. And these are implemented in all ASEAN +3 countries with high stringency in this scenario. This will be the focus of this presentation, but let me also just mention that we compared this core scenario to a number of alternative ones, including a global high stringency scenario where we also include policy action beyond the APT region, and a differentiated stringency scenario that investigates the implications of a less ambitious pathway in the APT, including with lower stringency in lower middle income countries, and for policies to curb demand and design for circularity. So turning to the key messages from the policy scenario analysis, the core finding is really that stringent policies along the life cycle of plastics in the APT region could end plastic pollution by 2050 locally within the APT. But let me break that down into sub-messages. First of all, an ambitious policy mix targeting all 4 policy levers could limit plastics use in the APT in 2050 to about 200 million tons in the region. And this corresponds to about a 28% reduction compared to levels expected in the baseline scenario. Secondly, while plastics use would still grow in this scenario compared to 2022 levels, all the growth in use is met through secondary plastics production, recycled plastics. And this is really thanks to a combination of, on the one hand, measures, stringent measures to curb demand, and also improve recycling, improve eco-design for easier recycling. And on the other hand, also measures to accelerate and scale up recycling. Slowing down use is also important, as it can help to reduce waste generation and reduce the size of the problem to be managed, in other words. In the high stringency scenario, about 186 million tons of waste is projected for 2050, which is corresponds to about a 23% reduction compared to what would be expected in the baseline scenario. And then turning to end-of-life fates for plastics waste. In the high stringency scenario, recycling becomes the dominant waste treatment option in the APT, which means that about more than a quadrupling of the recycling rate would need to occur in the region from the already relatively high 12% recycling rate in 2022 to more than 50% in 2050. And then lastly, thanks to the very large improvements in waste collection and treatment that could be achieved in this scenario, mismanaged waste is not only reduced significantly, but brought to near zero. And as a consequence, also a leakage to the environment is nearly eliminated within the region. It's important to note that in order to achieve this, very important advancements would still need to be made in waste collection and treatment and recycling, especially where in the regions, in the areas where there are currently gaps, significant gaps in waste collection and infrastructure, and where unsafe disposal practices are common. And on the other hand, as I mentioned earlier, reduction policies are also critical to reduce the amounts of waste generated. So in short, while we know that global action is needed to end plastic pollution comprehensively and protect global commons such as the oceans, and this is also a finding that we have from previous reports such as the Global Plastics Outlook, what this new outlook says is that the APT region can already act ambitiously. It really holds the ability to reduce plastic pollution that is generated within the region and deliver large local benefits. Now, there will be costs for this transition to plastic pollution-free economies. The macroeconomic impacts of a high stringency scenario are estimated at about 0.8% of GDP in 2050 for the APT region as a whole. But it's important to mention that these costs will be heavier for ASEAN countries, where they are generally above 2% of baseline GDP by 2050 on average, and particularly higher for lower middle income countries. This is really because these countries generally require an even faster scale up of policy action and an overall a significant transformation of their waste management systems. Of course, these costs should need to be contextualized. They need to be understood in the context of, first of all, already relatively fast growth in GDP that is expected also in the baseline scenario for the region, particularly in lower middle income countries where costs are also higher. And secondly, of course, these costs do not take into account the valuation of the benefits of policy action in the form of reduced pollution and reduced damages from plastic pollution. But really, this heterogeneity in the economic costs also points to the need to strengthen international cooperation and ensure that there are sufficient capacity building efforts to ensure that all countries in the region have the financial and technical means to strengthen policy frameworks in line with the goal of eliminating plastic pollution. With this, I hand over to Shardul to conclude.
Thanks very much, Elena. So very quickly, in terms of what are some of the takeaway messages, as we've shown in this presentation, the APT countries are acting to address plastic pollution. There are national plans, there's strengthened regional cooperation. There are also some positive indicators like the recycling rate in the region, which is much higher than the global average. But the progress is uneven. And there are significant challenges, most notably with regard to mismanaged plastic waste. And as a result of that, the current policies can slow, but they will not reverse recent trends in regional plastic leakage. The point from the analysis on our policy scenarios is that while global cooperation is needed to end plastic pollution on a global scale, the APT countries have the capability to nearly eliminate plastic leakage in the region through the adoption of stringent policies across the life cycle. But of course, it also needs stronger policy design, implementation, and financing. And ending plastic pollution will require capacity building, stronger enforcement, and regional cooperation. And finally, before I wrap up, I just wanted to note that this outlook beyond the co-presenters of the report, Ruben and Elena, there was a large team at OECD which was actively involved and contributed in various ways. And we benefited from the expertise and insights from several external partners who are listed there, most notably the Institute for Global Environmental Studies and the Economic Research Institute for ASEAN and East Asia, And we'd also like to acknowledge financial support from the Ministry of Environment, Japan. And I'll leave you with I encourage you to download the report, and the QR code is available here and on our website. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Shardul, Ruben, and Eleanor, for that overview of the new reports, and really telling stuff in there. And with me, a couple of graphs that particularly stood out with the surge in plastic use in the region since 1990, and the positive signs of policies being put in place, but still some red areas in that circle that suggest it's very much in the early stages. So now I'm going to invite our discussants to react, respond, and comment on what they've heard. And now I'd like first to give the floor to Noriko Tamiyahase from the Japanese Ministry of the Environment. Noriko, over to you.
Thank you for inviting me to this seminar, and I'd like to express my gratitude about the launch of the report and to the organizers for holding this event at such a timely moment just before the Inc. 5.2. And I also like to thank all of the participants today. And I believe that this Asia Plastic Outlook report highlights the high potential of contribution by this region to end the plastic pollution. And about the comment to the report, related to the comment to the report, I'd like to introduce some Japan's measures to combat the plastic pollution. And our measures is a combination of regulatory and voluntary approaches. And for example, this report points out that the release of plastic waste into the environment is largely due to mismanaged plastic waste. And in Japan, illegal dumping on land as well as marine area is prohibited by indicative law and the waste management law and marine pollution prevention law. And it is very punitive nature. But these laws and other relevant laws like coastal environment protection law also encourage voluntary initiatives by the local governments and private sectors to stop mismanaged plastic waste. And for ensuring the compliance to the law, it is also important to establish appropriate system. And for example, about a collection of waste, this is a point that highlighted in the report too. Like many countries in Asia, Japan has very narrow roads, and therefore collection using small vehicles is very efficient. But on the other hand, as cities and population expand, waste collection area also expanding. So to adequately respond to this situation, Japanese municipal governments with large collection area have established special facilities for intermediate processing, where the waste is transferred from the small vehicles to large transport vehicles. And this intermediate processing facility enables efficient transportation of waste from narrow alleys to the wider areas. So now this collection system works quite well in Japan. So it's a combination of efforts by municipal government and also our central government. And about the recycling, there are various individual laws in quite numbers of areas, like packaging, construction, home appliances, and automobiles. So we have each law for each area. And these deploys EPR system, which is also highlighted in this report. And producers are obliged to do recycling or paying some cost for recycling according to EPR. But for EPR to function effectively, it is essential to establish a collection and a recycling system, which I explained before. And also it is necessary to get consumers to cooperate or involved in that system. So establishing this kind of a physical and social system is essential. And the point that Japan has been working quite intensively. And the oldest recycling law is for packaging, and it was in 1995. So we have more than 30 years of experience for packaging recycling. And these laws are not necessarily targeted solely at the plastic products, but they ultimately contribute to proper waste management. and promotion of recycling for products containing plastics. But in addition to these individual laws, we have a plastic resource circulation law, and it is the latest law enforced in 2022. And it has more comprehensive measures throughout the life cycle of plastic products. And it also has a regulatory part for obliging the producers who have certain level of production amount of plastic products to set a reduction target, for example. But in addition to this regulatory part, about the manufacturing stage, the law sets some product design guidance applicable for all plastic products. But this is quite general, very, very general guidance. So now the business sectors are working on more detailed product design, a kind of criteria. And these are very voluntary initiatives, but businesses sectors are quite active in Japan. And under these measures, like this report points out, now Japan realizes a very low release rate of less than 1%. And finally, we believe that the scientific knowledge and the data play an important role as a foundation for effective policies to advance these initiatives. And in particular, we are focusing on harmonization of methods, for example, the methods for monitoring of plastics in the environment. And also we are developing some database for monitoring the data. And through this kind of, and this database is quite global databases. So we believe that this kind of creating this kind of global observation system through the tools will enhance our understanding and discussion, not only at national level, but at the global and the regional level. So today I could introduce just some of examples of our measures due to time limitation, but the last words, as I mentioned before, the characteristics of Japan's efforts include not only regulations, but also voluntary actions by collaboration with private sector and local governments. And because of the involvement of local governments, we can meet local needs. And we'd like to further promote the measures, and also by utilizing our own experience, we would like to cooperate with many countries in the region and beyond. Thank you very much.
Well, thanks very much, Noriko, for giving us those insights into the policy approaches Japan is putting in place. And I know that in other areas as well, that mix of regulatory and voluntary policy approaches is one that is very frequently used in Japan and to good effect. Really interested too in your description of the small vehicles on narrow roads transferring to bigger ones and ensuring there is efficient collection. So we are getting a number of questions in from our audience, which is great. Please feel free to add more. I feel we won't have a chance to get to all of them during the course of the webinar, but I know our experts are keeping an eye on the chat and can perhaps respond to some of them that we don't get to online. So next, I'd like to introduce Bunga Kanisa from the World Resources Institute, Indonesia. Bunga, can you briefly discuss the status of plastics policies in Indonesia, which I think stood out in some of the graphs in the report, as well as recent successes and challenges in tackling plastic pollution?
Thank you, Joe, and congrats for the launch of report. So yeah, I will share the updates of plastic pollution policies in Indonesia, and also updates on challenges and also achievements from Indonesia. So the government of Indonesia is targeting 70% of marine debris leakage reductions, basically by this year, and we already achieved 41.68% back then in 2023. So as for now, as we achieving 2025, the government of Indonesia is currently in the process of revising the presidential regulations on marine debris handling, and also a national policy and strategy for management of household waste and similar household waste merged into one regulations. Well, to support that as well, the government of Indonesia is now in the process of strengthening the EPR for packaging regulations into more mandatory policies with integrating the collective collections like PROs and also the registry components under the draft. And also, the government of Indonesia is targeting 100% of waste collections properly collected and handled by 2029. It's a strong target. And also, through the Ministry of Environment to support the target, they enforce the closures of more than 300 open dumping landfill, and also enforcing them to transitions into closed or sanitary landfill across Indonesia. And also through our subnational governments, we are now enforcing phase out of single-use plastics in more than 100 cities across Indonesia. And also acknowledging that funding is one of the challenges to tackle plastic waste and also solid waste in Indonesia. The government is also working on several policies now. So as for now, as we have only 0.6% on average, the subnational budget for waste management, the national government is now enforcing the subnational government to increase the number to 3% on average by giving them the incentive to the subnational government who allocate more than 3% of budget for waste management. And also the national government now enforcing the waste retributions in all provinces in Indonesia. And of course, partnered with the non-state actors to strengthen the plastic and also solid waste management, including to increase the investability of waste operators at the subnational level. I saw a lot of between plastic pollution or waste management and GDP's relations also included in the report. As for now, Indonesia has a target to increase our GDP to 8% nationally, and we're now trying to align every policies, including for waste management, to align with the national target. So yeah, thank you. That's the insight from Indonesia.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that. And I'm particularly interested to hear that there is work being done on EPR policy. And also that point you made about the need to ensure there is enough budgetary support to enable policy changes to be implemented as well. Next, I would like to turn to Junu Shrestha at the World Bank. And Junu, what do you feel is the report's relevance in the context of the negotiations taking place this coming week to secure a global plastics treaty? And what do you feel is the value add of this report beyond Asia in the context particularly of those negotiations?
Thank you, Joe, for having me here. And first of all, congratulations. This OECD report is very timely and insightful. I think in relevance to global plastic treaty negotiations happening later in the week, it provides really, from our perspective, my perspective, quantitative analysis and policy-tested options. This really supports the conversations that are ongoing, have been ongoing for 2 years now, with analysis and rigor that adds to the quantitative nature of the discussion, right? This focuses on the strategic priority in the South Asia region. So really gives where to focus. ASEAN +3, as the report shows, accounts for 1/3 of the global GDP, where plastic usage is increasing, and so is the leakage. It underscores that without more ambitious policies, waste generation in the region would double. So it really does show that Southeast Asia region needs to be the focus of the negotiations, but also provides a roadmap for how to deal with, or blueprint for how to discuss other areas in the world where similar trends are being observed or can be predicted, right? Another important point under the strategic regional focus that it provides is not only that it is an important region, but where to focus. Like the speakers pointed out, in LMICs, to deal with LMICs in a differentiated approach and focus on more on collection and recycling in these countries, right? This really gives the granularity in the discussions, adding to the flavor and the content of the discussion itself. Second, it really highlights the evidence-based policy roadmap, adding again to the rigor. In the report, policy packages, as discussed, are tailored to the diversity of the economies, ranging from Japan and Korea to Indonesia, Philippines, and other countries. This comprehensive analysis of baseline, differentiated ambition, high stringency, along with global high stringency scenarios, really gives us an opportunity to compare and have a very informed discussion on what to do where and what policy packages could be applicable, right? So I think this really nicely lays out differentiated approaches for countries that are at different stages, which needs to be acknowledged. And it really gives out that a roadmap for the countries and for the discussion. So also in the model scenarios, in the high stringency scenario, it shows that near elimination of plastic leakage, like shown in the presentation before, is possible with implementation of policy package. And economic impact is below 1%. Again, it is possible, and how to make it feasible is the question, right? And it does provide, again, the roadmap to do so. May not be very easy, but there's a discussion to be had and lays out how to have these discussions. So that is very, very important as we walk into the negotiation later in the week. Another point I would like to highlight here is in terms of the relevance to the negotiation. It does provide the strategic focus on the region, but also highlights that only regional action alone is insufficient to stop plastic leakage into the ocean as a whole, which is a global agenda, right? Even with near elimination of leakage in Asia, it highlights that transboundary inflows from imported waste persist unless high stringency measures are adopted globally. So it again highlights the need for global ambition that has been talked about in the negotiation. And a very critical another point tied to some of the issues that the speakers talked about, different variety of income countries. The report directly informs just transition discussion that we've all been having in our work and in the negotiation discussions. Just the fact that it lays out countries in different at the different stages of economy and deals with them differently is very important. It shows also that the GDP loss, less than 1%, is different in high middle income countries versus low middle income countries in the region. So, and I think one number to highlight that I saw in the report is the amount 1.1 trillion cumulative investment needed in waste management system, and most of it to be mobilized for countries with limited capacity. And very key is it acknowledges the role of informal workers that we have been seeing in all the countries that we've been working in the Philippines, Indonesia, Thailand, Cambodia, and others, right? This report does reinforce the need for social inclusion and improvement of their working conditions. So in a package, it really adds, again, the granularity in the discussion really gives us the numbers and the rationales and the policy packages moving from SUP ban all the way to design for circularity, from increasing complexity. So that layout of the map is very, very important for the negotiators to have. Value add beyond Asia, definitely, I already touched upon it. First of all, the methodology itself, it provides the relevant analytical framework, how to think through these issues in a more analytical manner, right? It provides a replicable methodology. It took three years, which is quite impressive for this really complex report to be produced. It can be replicated somewhere else, would require capacity, but can be done. Policy roadmap for tackling plastic pollution. It shows the trends that are most likely in other regions too. Again, an example, right? It provides a prototype. The patterns revealed in the report demonstrate an increased short-lived packaging, increase in short SUPs, and increase, like you saw, in open burning emissions. Also import bans in some cases, right? Which result in waste redirection, which we have started to see in West Africa, Latin American countries. By utilizing these this kind of evidence, other regions can anticipate upcoming regulatory or infrastructure challenges and prepare for them. The report also shows the differentiated policy package by income that can be used in other regions, which we see in Africa, we can anticipate in Africa. Not one size fits all. That's very much appreciated and can be used in other regions. Quantification of infrastructure needs, which 1.1 trillion and 80% of this to be directed to LMICs with large waste management deficit provides very critical insight for other regions and countries on equity, financing, and just transition, right? These findings are translatable to other regions with similar characteristics like South Asia, Sub-Saharan Africa, also parts of Latin America, which are, we know, grappling with informal waste system, increasing plastic consumption, and very limited waste management infrastructure. For our sort of dimension and financing work as well, what I found was very appropriate and relevant.
Sorry,
this is
we're
my
running
last point.
short of time. Yeah, okay.
This is
So
my
if
last
you
point.
can conclude, that would be great. Thank you.
Commercial and blended, we have financing alignment. And what it points out, commercial and blended options, loans for bankable urban, larger sort of facilities that can be bankable, and grants and high concessional financing for rural collection, informal sector transition. This is very useful for decision-making on financing alignment everywhere globally. So I would like to end with that. Thank you for your attention.
No, thank you so much for that. Really helpful to I've noted down a qualitative analysis and policy-tested options, and that point you really emphasized about the different national circumstances with the microcosm in the region that we've been looking at, and its possibility to expand out or be used elsewhere, but taking into account the different circumstances and the transboundary issues and implications in order to ensure there is a just transition. So I've got one more speaker finally, and thank you for your patience. Can I welcome Indradi Faisal Ibrahim from its acronym is ERIA, the Economic Research Institute for ASEAN and East Asia. Interested to hear your or areas perspectives on how to leverage the data and the recommendations from this OECD report that would help to build the capacity further of ASEAN countries. Indradi.
Okay, thank you very much. Yes, I think it is very long report, but I find a lot of interesting findings and detailed recommendations. So the OECD Regional Plastic Outlook Report we view as a beneficial resource that not only quantifies the scale of plastic challenge, but also provides scenario-based policy pathways. So from area's perspective, this report offers strategic levers to build ASEAN capacity in terms of data information for policymaking, the needs to strengthen capacity, and the importance of regional cooperation. I'd like to point out some of the findings of this report. For example, I think ASEAN countries can pay close attention to the interesting and positive analysis of this report on high stringency policy. The report mentioned that the costs of high stringency scenario are relatively modest in general, adding the fact that a less strict policy or the current linear model is also quite expensive. For example, you still need cost to landfill the plastic or worse leak to the environment and ultimately lose the value in the plastic change. So ASEAN countries or organizations working in the region can leverage this finding to further analyze the positive benefits that are not included yet in this report, such as public health, the environmental protection, or benefit for other sectors such as tourism, fisheries, and so on. The report quantifies that the economic impact of regional leadership will be beneficial, especially compared to the environmental benefits for this region. I hope this data give policymakers the confidence to raise ambitions, knowing that it's both feasible and justifiable. It is not that it is important to pay attention on the policy approaches tailored based on the country situations. At this point, I think upstream, middle, and downstream policy mix is critical. So I saw in the report there's an insightful infographic explaining what is the normal or advanced approaches written in the report. So countries can benefit from seeing these policy options and start to analyze based on their capacity. While organizations such as AREA, we can help further in terms of supporting these countries. So similar with this report, I like to reaffirm the effective policy intervention can be implemented if there is a capacity of policy makers or government to design, implement, monitor, and enforce those policies. AREA, for example, we are enhancing the knowledge sharing and capacity development through developing a set of capacity building activities. For example, this year, transforming business towards circular economy, advancing monitoring and data-driven policy making, and supporting the integration of informal sector in plastic waste. I think the findings of this report are very much aligned of our analysis in the knowledge centers. That said, this recommendation can help inform ASEAN countries and other organizations working in the field to identify the current needs. Next week is important indeed, and I personally hope ASEAN can deliver commitment in the ongoing negotiations for an international legally binding instrument on plastic waste. This may result in further capacity building, technical assistance, or even investment from more developed countries. Hopefully in the future, not only as the pollution hotspot, but also ASEAN can be a model or successful stories to tackle plastic pollution. So I think in conclusion, we can leverage the data and recommendation of this report holistically, starting from the very first raise awareness on the issue, explaining the impact and some of the recommendation on how to tackle it. Once you have awareness, of course, we get deeper, which is to improve the capacity of relevant stakeholder in ASEAN, since we need sufficient capacity and maximize available resource or fill the gap. While improving the region capacity, we can work to standardize or harmonize the effort so that we can have a good comparable data to support developing the evidence-based policies. And knowledge sharing and lesson learned are also important, so we can accelerate the development by peer learning and strengthen collaboration and partnership among ASEAN countries. So I think ultimately, by linking science and data with policy, such as written in the recommendation, I believe we can accelerate the progress toward plastic circularity and eliminate plastic pollutions across the region.
Radi, thank you very much indeed. Really interesting you mentioned the other co-benefits for public health, for example, the cross-sectoral benefits of action, which is another area possibly to look into. And I very much liked your comment about this report helping to give confidence to governments, to policymakers to raise ambition. So thank you for your comments. Now we've very little time. But perhaps we can take one or maybe two quick questions. One from the audience, and I have to note that our experts have been answering online through the chat a number of the questions and ideas that have been shared there. But one question that came through was to ask about the methods we used at the OECD to collect the data that is used in this report, given that data is not necessarily readily available, certainly across the disparity of the diversity of countries in the region. I don't know who would like to take that. Ruben, perhaps, or Shardul?
Ruben would take it.
Okay, Ruben.
Thank you for transmitting the question. Thank you very much for this question. This was actually a very important challenge for this outlook. Previously, we had developed analysis for 15 global regions, and here we wanted to focus on the Southeast and East Asia. So we looked more extensively at the ASEAN +3 countries in two different ways. The first one is very quantitatively. We developed, we went through collecting and reconciliating national level data for economic activity, plastics use, waste generation, and end-of-life fate for all of the 13 APT countries. That was complemented by a review of the existing literature and expert input. That gives you a database. That gives us a database for large-scale industrial production of plastics and the life cycle of plastics in its entirety from 1950 to the present day. I would be remiss if I didn't mention that there are uncertainties in this data. Particularly, for instance, mismanaged waste rates can be uncertain. It depends a lot on the definitions. For instance, landfilling can be very sanitary, but also if done in a non-sanitary way, can lead to leakage of matter or even plastics. So it's a very big challenge still in the area, which is why there are international initiatives to improve waste monitoring, and it's part of the discussion for negotiations. The second part of the data collection was for the policy stocktake, and for this we assessed 32 policy indicators based on several types of documents. So national documents, so plans, policies, legislation, press releases, etc. Literature, independent policy assessments, conference document, as well as international organization documents, for instance, the World Bank or JZ, and industrial sources as well. In all of this, this was not an individual effort, and I want to also emphasize that we had discussions with the ASEAN +3 countries, both with experts from the countries that either provided input or reviewed our input, for instance, through discussions with AREA and IHS and their network of experts, but also with government representatives from all of the countries from the APT region, which were invited to provide feedback on our analysis. I think that's a comprehensive answer. Thank you for the question.
It is indeed a comprehensive answer. Thank you, Ruben. Now, we'd love to answer more questions. This report, I think, gives us many avenues to explore things a lot further. But sadly, we're pretty well out of time. So I would want to start closing things up first by reiterating my thanks to Shardul, Ruben, and Eleanor for the presentation of the key findings of the report, but also particularly warmly thank Noriko, Bunga, Junu, for whom it is apparently 3 a.m. So thank you for joining us at that very unfriendly hour, and to Indradi for having shared some really valuable insights, not only from the report, but also giving us some flavour of the policy action currently taking place in the region. I really want to applaud the dedication this region, the APT region, has clearly got to ending plastic pollution. And it's really encouraging to see the positive trends that are emerging at all levels of government, even though there are, of course, a lot of implementation challenges still to overcome. And it's also positive to have demonstrated that Southeast and East Asia can nearly eliminate mismanaged waste and plastic leakage in the region by taking that ambitious action across the whole life cycle of plastics. So I really hope that there is indeed a positive outcome at INC 5.2 in Geneva in the next coming days. And that in that respect, I do want to, in addition to thanking you all for joining us today, to point out that if you are attending INC 5.2 in Geneva next week, please join us for an in-person event on the 5th of August, where we will be discussing pathways to end plastic pollution in Southeast and East Asia, and we'll delve further into the types of great questions that we've received during this Green Talk webinar. There is a link to register in the chat if you are interested. So to access the OECD's Regional Plastics Outlook for Southeast and East Asia and to learn more about our work on plastics, please visit our dedicated website, and the link for that is also included in the chat. I really hope that you found the discussions today to be stimulating and very much look forward to seeing you at the next OECD Green Talk Live, and that'll focus on positive incentives for biodiversity, and it's taking place on the 10th of September. And a third link to that Green Talk Live is included in the chat. So again, thank you everyone for joining us today, and I wish you all the very best for summer holidays if you're in the Northern Hemisphere, or for a not too cold winter if you're in the South. Thank you and goodbye.